Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Tuesday edition of the GAI Insights Gen AI News Briefing. I am David Delalo. I am here with 5 of our analysts, one of which obviously is our founder, John Sviokla. And we will do our usual thing, which is go through a bunch of the latest articles on generative AI news and let you know whether it is essential to read right now, important, maybe read it when you have a little time, optional, no need to read. You can just look at our newsletter and we give you a brief synopsis about it. So we will jump in today. We've got several articles. I really enjoyed a few of them. We will see what bias really looks like in an LLM. We will talk about some research that shows some information about jailbreaks and what you can do about them, and lots more. Without any more of this summarizing from me, we're going to go to Ankaj so he can let us know what these articles are and we will discuss.
Thanks, David. So the first one that we have for today is from the Wall Street Journal and is authored by Billy Lin, and it talks about how Color Health's cancer pilot, which uses OpenAI's GPT-4o model, is helping doctors screen and treat cancer patients.
Yes, very interesting. Luda.
Yeah, very interesting, but optional. There's a number of use cases like that in the healthcare space. And also, OpenAI has been on the go to get partnerships. This is another one in the health space. Yes, it is going after preparing the plan for people diagnosed with cancer, all the tests that are needed, all the various insurance approvals and the like. So a lot of paperwork that this tool is handling. So good stuff, but optional for me.
All right, optional vote. Anybody else feel otherwise or have any commentary to add?
I agree. It's a good use, but a very common one that we see, sort of administrative. And with cancer care, could be quite important because there is a lot of administration with cancer care because it's so complicated for most patients. But still, something we've seen before and a good use of these technologies.
Yeah, it was more specific than some of the articles I've seen that outline some of the healthcare use cases and talking about how they're using it to accelerate prior authorizations, which I'm sure is a headache in terms of documentation and such. So
Yeah.
it was a nice piece. I mean, if you're in the healthcare space, I think it's a definite one to read for that reason. It goes, like I said, a little beyond depth. So maybe we'll make a note that healthcare folks should definitely tune into this one, but otherwise, maybe not for you.
Yeah, it's a good point. Prior auth, as it's called in the healthcare industry, prior authorization is a complex process that generally doesn't need to be, but again, it's minutia and bureaucratic, and lots of mistakes are made, and it causes delays in treatment.
Yeah, no, it seems to strike the right tone of support and leaving agency with the doctors.
Yeah. All right. We'll go optional, and we will go on to the next one.
Okay. The next one comes from Digiday and is authored by Sam Bradley, and it talks about how Publicis Group is using Gen AI at Keynes.
Yes, and I recall us reviewing one of the models that they actually customized for Pfizer several months ago, actually, and included that in a piece that I was working on. John, what do you think about this one?
Yeah, I put this as optional, kind of a fun story. As a guy who used to run marketing at a big services company, hey, this is great what they're doing at Con. They're working with their existing clients. They've been working hard to, expand, their market and get to new clients. And what I thought was the most interesting thing of this for me was how they very much were encouraging companies to use their own data to build their own capabilities. And I think that's a big deal. I think, and that's from a services provider standpoint, that's kind of a double-edged sword. You like when they buy everything from you, but I think it's smart that the companies are busy both using their own data and building their internal capability. Because I really believe that knowledge advantage, digital, intelligence advantage is going to largely be something that you're going to want underneath your stock price and within your C corp, not as a common good. I think transaction costs, the kind of stuff that Google delivered and the internet delivered, I think are more universal. So optional, interesting story.
All right, one vote for optional. Anything else, folks?
No, I agree. Interesting story, but nothing earth-shattering.
Yeah, there was a good stat in there. I actually shared this article with a couple of folks that I know in my world in marketing. 60% of agencies are using generative AI, according to this article. So the uptake is there. And obviously, this was one of the first use cases, right, to start really taking traction, getting some products built around it, Jasper, Rater, et cetera. So.
When I was working at PwC, we pitched a, let's say, unnamed competitor to Publicis. We tried to make exactly the point, which is that the way you had scale in the old days, you had lots of variety. So, you don't like this agency, go to this agency. And that's what Sir Martin Sorrell did at WPP and others. That we said, hey, look, the whole organization is going to move to more about, hey, we have proprietary data across these different entities, and this proprietary data can be of value to you. That's what Publicis is obviously talking about here. We couldn't get the job sold, the consulting gig to do that transformation, but it's nice to see it play out.
Yeah, what was interesting to me, it's optional for me, but what was interesting is they're pushing into more product-oriented data use, right? To differentiate, because the assumption here is it is becoming competitive. It will be that AI is used by everyone, right? So how do you differentiate? So that angle was actually pretty interesting to highlight.
Well, back to our wins, article in Harvard Business Review back September, we said if you're in the crucible, which these folks are, we said 3 to 5 years, and your whole business is being transformed. We may have been too slow. Maybe more like 12 to 24 months.
But it is an interesting question. How do you stand out? And it is true that it is clever use of your own data.
And have really good humans in the mix.
Totally.
All right. Optional for this one. What do we have next, Akash?
Okay. The next one is a research paper, and it provides benchmarking of various jailbreak attacks on large language models.
All right. And Adam, you built us a fun GPT to explore this. I did use it and appreciate it, as I did not have time to thoroughly read the entire article, but I felt like I got more than enough from what you provided. And Adam just dropped that in the chat for anybody else that wants to use it. It's definitely helpful. Adam, what did you think?
Yeah, look, it's not that often that I think we elevate research beyond optional, and I would consider this important. Certainly, if you're a CISO, and more specifically a CISO at an organization that's already implementing or building your own customer-facing LLMs, this could be considered essential. But more broadly, even for an AI leader to be passing to their security team, I think it's worthwhile, at a minimum, to go have a look at the GPT I've made and have a chat with it about what's in this research paper. The research paper itself is extensive, but it covers a lot of useful things. It talks about the key factors in jailbreak attacks, various attack and defense methods, as well as they provide a framework for assessing LLM vulnerabilities. So I consider it optional. Important reading.
Yeah, it covered a lot of ground. There were a few things that I think are somewhat well known, and such as the length of the prompt matters, the repetitiveness of a prompt. Putting it hundreds of times is what matters. But there was also, I think, a lot of good information on how to.
What I found really interesting, it also focused quite a bit on how LLMs are being used on the attack side as well for attacking these LLMs, which is really the game of cat and mouse here is what they're providing to the bad actors, and how they can use them against their own against other LLMs.
So you're going essential or important?
I'd say it's important.
All right, one important vote. What did everybody else think?
I
John?
was on the fence between optional and important. Adam makes a lot of good points, so I will say important here. It's hard to get through if you're not very technical.
That's why I made the GPT. I wouldn't recommend the article yet. So the research is deep. Yeah.
Yeah. But it does make it's good. A little fire and brimstone is good for most AI leaders to make sure they understand there are risks here, and your most important job in general as a senior executive or a board leader is managing risk.
Yeah.
Right. And we've got a vote of confidence from one of our faithful followers who will actually be a guest analyst in a few weeks for us, Michael Novak, also saying important. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I thought important. I thought it was interesting. I wonder, having been, I'm a bit of a mutt. I'm Irish, Polish, Lithuanian, and Scot. Okay, so Irish, Polish, Irish, Scot on my mother's side, Lithuanian, Polish on the other. So I always have those are places that were run over on a regular basis. So I always look for political motive in some of these things. Not always, but often. And we have the three authors are from the Hong Kong Institute of Science and Technology, which is beautiful. I've lectured there. And since the Chinese takeover, I wonder kind of where this all sits in is this simply reporting out and stuff they're doing on a contract or something? It's kind of interesting. And why would they do that? But
the thing is called AI trust. I was also curious about where it's coming from. It's AI trust. I bet you this is there's a grant from someplace, and they're doing a project to.
I would just like somebody to look at the code before I download it and put it on my machine.
Yeah, I agree. I thought that was my instant thought as well.
Oh, let me,
Yeah.
It's,
But
anyway.
it is interesting, even though it's technical. I think it's well written, so you can go through it, look at the results there in cool tables, right, and still get the gist of it without even the ChatGPT summary. So I think it is worth a read. So important for me as well.
All right, we've got some consensus here on important. We will mark it as such. Akash, what do we have?
Okay, the next one is from TechCrunch, and it talks about how Black founders are creating tailored ChatGPTs for a more personalized experience.
Yes, I thought this was a really good article, actually. Well sourced and provided a reality to what bias looks like. We keep talking about, the models can be biased. Be careful, be careful. And I think it's helpful to actually crystallize what that actually looks like to someone who is experiencing that bias. Luda, what did you think about this one?
I was between optional and important, ended up optional. I know it's maybe not socially correct, but and people will correct me. But I think it is yes, we've talked about bias. Yes, we know these models were trained mostly on US data. So we know it's out there that it exists, right? And it's Africa, Kenya, Black, brown, it's just not there. So I applaud these entrepreneurs that are building it with a specific cultural angle and depth. But I think it's obvious that this will be happening around the world until these models have more information to go with. So optional for me.
Yeah, I came down on important. I think that what's interesting is I think that the essence of culture is bias. I mean, culture is a biased view of the world, and so once you get rid of all bias, you have no culture. So now the question of should there be other represented biases, more salad bowl than melting pot? Absolutely. You know what I mean? And I think another interesting thing is that and just to finish that other point, there is no universal ethics, right? So there's always going to be prejudice because there's always going to be judgment. There's always going to be morals. You know what I mean? So anyway, that doesn't mean that we don't fight against, extreme examples of it, I think. And you can see it here. I think a really important foundational thing here is as we move up, I think of the internet as automating transactions in Google and so forth. Now we're starting to get into to content, language, and intelligence, and that is much more localized and locally defined. Some parts of it are universal, like certain parts of science, but a lot of it, culture and so forth, I think is localized. And I really think it's fantastic that if you think of biodiversity, I think we have to talk about culture diversity and that kind of stuff. And, these models are at risk of making all that homogenized if we're not homogenized from one point of view, and I think that would be a bad thing. So I think this is really wonderful and important.
I agree. I thought it was important for a couple of reasons, as you point out. I think it's important for leaders to just be reminded constantly that these models have bias. You can call it, culture filters, whatever you want to call it. There is always bias, and the question is, what kind of bias do you want? And I think it's just important to be aware. It's just a consciousness-raising thing to be aware of it. Also, I think I've been saying, this meme of dog catches car. This is an industry where the dog catches car metaphor works for me. Who thought it was a good idea to train on the internet? Who thought that was a good idea? Well, it's cheap and easy. The researchers thought it was a good idea. It's not a great idea if you want to make a robust model and you want to control for bias. It's just not. But it's easy and cheap and free. Well, maybe it's free. We'll find out as the courts settle things. But I think that this is a lesson in data is really, really important if you want to control for bias. And these people are demonstrating it and demonstrating it in an entrepreneurial way.
I think there's also going to be market opportunities to serve different,
Absolutely. It's yeah.
Look at politics. Look at how politics morphs itself into different segments. And I think it's a good inspiration for this.
Yeah, I agree. It was going to be a point that I was going to make. That's not only is, word of caution, but word of, hey, there's opportunity to do this. I loved one quote in there that said, if you want artificial general intelligence, you have to make sure you give these models a third of the world's knowledge that's missing right now, right? So there's that too. So, okay, definitely coming in on important on this one. Ankaj, what do we have next?
Okay, the next one comes from Google DeepMind, and it's again a research paper which talks about generating audio for video. So till now, all the video models that we had, they were mute models, but now you can generate audio for those videos as well.
Wow, I'll tell you, this one blew my mind. I mean, the movie industry, producers, etc., and then those doing the functions here of creating scores and matching it up with the tone of the film, etc. I mean, I thought this was amazing. The one where the drummer, they have an image here where a drummer is drumming, and the model played drum beats exactly to the movement of his hand, and these were not drum beats that were recorded. This is just the model making it up. I mean, this I thought was really amazing. I forget who I assigned this one to. I'm looking.
That was me.
You, Adam. What'd you think?
Yeah, so it's amazing. I think the news itself is optional. It may have very significant impacts on many industries. It is still research at this point. It's not a tool that's out there and that's available. But what it's doing that's so significant is that it's actually processing the pixels within the image and inferring based on that, as you're saying, right? It sees when in the video the drumstick is hitting the drum, and it determines that's the right time to make a sound. So it is very cool. It's very powerful. It will have a big impact. They're also not the only one that's pushing forward in this. I think it was just today 11 Labs announced, because they not long ago started offering not just AI voice, but AI sound effects as well. And they've now opened up a free API for that. So people can basically take something that's going on and make a call off to 11 Labs for background sound effects. So we're going to see more and more the demand, because the video models just make the picture, for this supplementary audio being brought into the equation. And this is a big step forward from Google. Still, I would consider it optional news, though.
A lot of video news, right? Also, Runway released a new model. as well, which I assume we'll have that on our agenda.
And Luma's Dream Machine is already adding new features to the capability. There's a lot going on right now.
So you wonder if OpenAI will start to try to accelerate the release of Sora, or Google releasing their tool to try to, get in the mix here. Okay, so we have one vote for optional. Any other thoughts here?
I actually was making. I originally thought essential, but I was making the case. I'm going to make the case for important, and it's the idea here. And I understand it's research, but I think that a huge unexplored area, or barely explored area, of commerce is sound. We have certain areas that are optimized, like Hollywood stories and so forth. I would say, but most meetings with businesses, most presentations, most customer interactions on the phone or even video have very, very little sound in them. And now we're in a TikTok world, and we're much more voice oriented. I think a tool like this can very efficiently carry the semantics of the image across into audio. I think it's going to be a very important dimension of differentiation and engagement, just the way intense video has been now. So anyway, I would vote for important. It's super cool. It really opens the mind, and I think it's going to be relevant to tons and tons of firms.
All right. Anybody backing important? I see Ludo about to share her opinion. What do you think, Ludo?
Yeah, I think it is important. I was blown away. Yes, there are other tools, and the field is evolving, but I think for the executives, it's really important to know that it is at the level that's about to be real serious. So, and with that, there's like John was saying, quite a bit of implications on the business applications that can actually be impacted. So I think it's.
Yeah, I'll go for important. I think, again, this is a research project, so it's hard to designate this particular thing as important because you can't even get out of it yet. But to Adam's point and to John's point, this is a trend that's happening, and I totally agree with John. The use of voice is emotional, as is the use of video. These are our strongest senses, and they are huge influencers on us. I'm not saying this is good or bad, because we've seen what happens with social media, but the power of the influence for businesses is very important.
Yeah, I think Michael put it beautifully here. He said, without sound strategy, your brand won't be found. And, Vivek's going down saying that, we're understanding the emotional tenor.
Yeah, and if anybody who's used ChatGPT 4.0, the interaction with audio is mind-blowing to me. The smoothness of both the listening and the speaking is really mind-blowing. So voice is going to become much more important. It should have been a long time ago in theory, but one of those things that just got overlooked for a long time by vendors.
Yes. All right. We have a majority on important. I am also in that majority, and we will go with important on this one. And we have one more piece for today.
Yes, the last one comes from New York Times and is authored by Steve Loher, and is talking about how AI is revolutionizing drug development.
Tim, tell us a little about this article and what you are rating it.
Yeah, I think, well, for anybody in pharma, life sciences in general, and maybe even healthcare, this is essential reading. For everybody else, it's probably optional. It's really interesting if you're into this stuff, but it's probably not a direct impact. This has been known. This is a good article. It's contrasting. The most interesting point is it's contrasting what I would call the atoms and the bits, as Nicholas Negroponte used to say, or the wet lab versus cyberspace lab. So if you think about the contrast they give, is this company that really is the focus of the article is really making incredibly high-speed automated drug testing combined with AI, which is hugely powerful because they're generating terabytes of data a day. I remember the first time I walked through Yahoo's storage in like 2004, and they were already generating terabytes of data a day, and nobody had any comprehension of what that would mean. But to me, it was like, okay, these guys are going to take over the world, and eventually they did. And the same thing is happening here. So the question is whether you need all that data, and Google is betting you don't. So Isomorphic Labs, which is Google's entree into this field and is the co-developer of the AlphaFold program that predicts protein structure, they're going at it totally with software, pretty much totally with software and existing data, betting that they don't have to build these enormously complicated wet labs. I think both approaches are probably going to be successful in certain ways, and they will, in fact, they are already revolutionizing drug design, which hopefully is good for all of us. But optional if you're not in the life sciences industry, unless you want to geek out on this stuff. It's a good read.
I would like to make a case for importance for a large majority of folks. This is an interesting in pharma, that's one thing, but think about materials. I am of the opinion that with this wave, we will have completely new materials surrounding us much faster than we think. With 3D printing, robotics, this type of capability to try and come up with new formulas for new materials, then test them, create data, get it improved, get tested. We will have new materials across the board. Usually a material, if you invest in a material company, 10 years, so not as bad as biotech, but still pharma, but still quite a long time. So if you cut the cycles that I think now we can, it's an enormous, it's a revolution. So I think we haven't seen anything yet in that space. And then in this way, I think it is important.
All right. Who's breaking the tie here? John?
Yeah, I had it as important. I mean, for a lot of the reasons that Luda said. This is, again, it feels good because it's vindication of our wins framework from back whenever, right? But yeah, no, I think like the amount of dough. The other thing that's interesting is that with the wealth disparity in the world and the growing wealth, period, people are going to pay anything to stay. I think, in the words of the economist, the marginal utility of another hour on Earth is huge. So price is inelastic. In other words, they'll pay anything to stay on the planet. So I think we're going to see a very interesting, huge investments in biopharma because the profit pool is infinite because people want to be alive. Anyway, it's going to get interesting.
All right. I'm coming down on important on this one. I think it's a story that will inspire. I think it will provide ideas. And I agree with Luda that the process that they're outlining, right, can take place in many different types of organizations outside of sciences.
Because that was actually the question I had, is how would this be applicable in other industries? And it's really like, you think about large scale data analysis, automation. This article at least goes into enough detail about how they executed on these things that I think there are ways that through analogy you can find applicability in other industries.
Yeah, so they've there are a number of projects that usually with NASA and the like, they're looking for like the material without a particular element, like avoid titanium in this type of thing. So there was a battery research project that created a battery from the beginning, from the idea to the real implementation in less than 6 months or something. This is incredible. And that's where it will be happening. So it will be pushing the frontiers of what we know.
All right, so we're coming in on important. Do you have our summary slide on Kash?
Yes, David, just coming up.
All right. No essentials today, but we do have 4 important articles for you. The one that we just discussed, Google's research on the sync up of video and sound. We've got the article on creating LLMs that line up with various cultures. And we've got the research on jailbreaks, how they happen and how to combat them. Everything else is optional. Anyone have any announcements today?
Oh, I have a new article that I'm just going to be posting on LinkedIn shortly on competing with computability. And
yes, I read it last night, John. Enjoyed it, and I thought it might be too last minute to throw it on the list today. So it's going on our list tomorrow, folks. So everybody on here needs to read this. Everybody around will share it, and we will discuss tomorrow.
All right. So I have to recuse myself.
No, you're allowed. You give the summary, right? You give the summary, and then we'll give the ratings.
Unless you give me a huge RV, then I can not recuse myself. Anyway, all right.
All right, have a good day, and we will talk to you tomorrow to share more news and whether you should pay attention to it or not. All right, have a good one.
Thanks.